Welcome to the Darkstream. This is Gab TV on Vox Day, and I'm very excited to be the first streamer. Hello, everyone. I can see the comments here. And yeah, that is Space Buddy coughing. So, see you all here on Gab. You know, we've been doing this on Periscope, and the reason that I was doing it on Periscope was in preparation for exactly this. So what I'm going to talk about first is we're going to do the news. I don't know if all of you have kept up on it, but the three big stories today were first of all related to General Flynn and the controversy over whether he was caught lying about his contacts with the Soviet before the administration took power. Now, Mike Cernovich claims that the story. However, it does look like there might be some meat to the story. Now, I have no way of knowing what's true or what's not, but what we do know is that it's quite common for there to be some level of communication between incoming administrations and foreign officials. What is likely and may well be an issue is the allegation that General Flynn lied about it. If that's true, then I would have to say that there's probably a reasonably good chance that he's going to need to resign. I don't think he'll be fired over it, but the thing is that the God Emperor does not tolerate that sort of weakness with the people that are working for him. And so I don't know what's true, but the thing is, from the alt-right perspective, I don't think it would be a big loss simply because General Flynn is one of the Trump administration's few connections to the neocons. And there was a lot of concern that Elliot Abrams was going to be brought in. Abrams is a confirmed neocon, someone who is definitely focused on war. Have to see what. I've heard a lot that he's, by all accounts, quite intelligent. But on the other hand, if he is shown to have lied, and if he is shown to have left Vice President Pence out to dry, then he should do the right thing and resign. So that was the first big story of the day. Big story of the day is something that is probably not quite as well known in the States, but some of you may not be aware that there is an election coming up in France, and that Marine Le Pen, favored candidate to win the first round of the election, but she is not considered likely to win the second round of the election, because what usually happens is when a non-mainstream candidate wins the first round or even reaches the second round, then the various mainstream parties ally together to defeat the person, and that's how the globalists have managed to stay in control in France. What's interesting, however, is that now the two major parties in France are finished third and fourth. So what the anticipation was that Francois Fillon was going to finish second in the election, and then he was going to beat Marine Le Pen in the second round. However, what recently came out is that they are charging both Francois Fillon and his wife for fraudulent payments for work that she didn't do. There's also allegations that their children were given um, were paid for work that they also didn't do. So Finland is in a lot of trouble. Now, complicating this is the fact that there are riots occurring that have been occurring in Paris for the last 3 days. A African claimed that he was sodomized by police using their batons, and so there's cars being destroyed, the usual stuff. But this is happening at the same time that they've had, what happened in Nice, the rise of the Front National in many local elections, and so it's going to be interesting. This is the combination of the riots and the fact that Flynn is appears to be a criminal, means that Le Pen does have a real shot. You wouldn't think so based on the polls. The information about the corruption of Flynn or about the recent Paris riots, and so it's going to be very interesting to see how that's going to shake out. Obviously, with Brexit and with the election of the God Emperor Trump, then there's reason to be optimistic. So now, unfortunately, the way I was that I was anticipating covering, but let's talk about something else, and let's talk about what we're seeing with the SJW doubling down in practically every area, from science fiction publishing, from Hollywood, to the media, to the New York Times. And by the way, now I remembered what I was what I was planning to talk about. It was very interesting today. The gave after the meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, instead of calling upon the mainstream media, upon the Daily Caller and another media organization that would not normally be addressed in a presidential press conference. And of course, this has the opposition media, as the Drudge Report put it, in a panic. And so, the opposition media wants to have it both ways. They want to be treated like the impartial fourth estate, and then they also want to be acting like, as Glenn Reynolds, Instapundit, puts it, unpaid Democratic advocates. And so what the Trump administration is doing is they are recognizing that the media is the enemy. Now, this is not news. Republicans have known this since the Nixon administration. It's been totally obvious to everyone since the Reagan administration. And yet, at no point in time have the Republicans ever acted on that knowledge. They have never treated the mainstream media like the opposition media. And the opposition media, as Steve Bannon calls it, because the media is in direct opposition to the Trump administration. There's no question about this. There's no doubt about this. And so what we're starting to see now is the Trump administration taking seriously the fact that the media is opposed to it, that the media is a self-appointed enemy, and they're behaving accordingly. And that's very, very good news if the administration starts to continue with that, continues with that theme, and if they continue taking advantage of the power that they have, the power of what Theodore Roosevelt called the bully pulpit. Darth Bannon clearly understands that there is no compromising with the media. Just like there's no compromising with the SJWs, either in your workplace, or at your school, or in your social circles. And so it's encouraging to see this. Now there's a lot of, yeah, somebody commented that Cernovich did a piece talking about why Republicans. It's because they're much more than they are with winning. And the conservatives, the libertarians, and so forth. The alt-right is focused on winning. Because if you don't win in politics, and politics, as we know, is just another form of war, then it doesn't really matter what you think or what your principles are, because you're not going to be in the game. You know, you're going to be living under the rule of your enemies. And so, we had some interesting debates recently. Some of you may be aware, Ivan Throne, who's a Castelli House author, Dark Triad Man on Gab, he hosted he was a former Obama voter who's moved right, like many of us. And so, but he's a civic nationalist. And it was interesting because Ivan was kind enough to prepare a PDF of the entire transcript of the debate. And I noticed on Gab that someone commented after reading the debate, they were feeling a little alt-right. And I think that of all of us, because as I like to say, right is the only political philosophy that is in line, that is in harmony with science, with history, and with current events. You know, conservatism is not. Progressivism is not. Libertarianism is not. Communism is not. Feminism is not. None of these political philosophies or ideologies are in harmony with the truth. They're not in harmony with history. They're not in harmony with what is happening. And so we have, and whether we're alt-light or whether we're alt-right, then what we have to do is continually focus on the truth. And it's interesting to see what is happening at Gab. They said that they don't like what they see because there's not enough leftists around. There's not enough banter. Because I think what we're seeing on Gab is that we are seeing a much better and deeper discourse that not everyone's obviously not in agreement. And so, there's a question just popped up. Would you say that the alt-right is more in accordance with Christianity? And I would say no. There's definitely pagan elements to the alt-right. But I would say, but somebody said, I hate having an echo chamber, and they want more diversity. There is tremendous diversity of thought on Gab. It's definitely not an echo chamber. I guarantee you that of the blog, none of them. I'm not saying that the vile, faceless minions won't do exactly what I tell them. They are sworn to mindless obedience, after all. I am the Dark Lord. But that doesn't mean that they necessarily disagree, that they necessarily agree. And so, but what I will say is that the Christian element of the alt-right is more in line and in harmony with the Bible than the churchianity and the Cuckservatism that we see babbling about how we have to welcome all refugees and how the lesson of the Good Samaritan is that we should let in 85 million people into the country. It's absolutely absurd. And here's the important thing that people need to understand. Politics are not. And even though identity politics are in the process of replacing ideology, it is to the benefit of minorities, and it is to the benefit of most of those identity groups if the alt-right and if the traditionalists win. Why? Well, why are they coming to live in the West in the first place? Why do they prefer to live in the West in the first place? It's very simple, because their lives are better there. And so the only way that the West can make the world a better place is if it remains the West and the West spreads outward, not if it brings into it. Okay? So anyhow, let's go ahead and take a couple questions here. It's a little bit, the comments are not necessarily in order the way that I would tend to expect. So I'll have to see here. Okay, they're kind of going up, I see. Are there any books I would recommend for understanding the history of ethnic conflicts? I would say look into military history. That's where you're going to find it. There's nothing really devoted to that. In fact, maybe that's something that Castelli should look into publishing. The military history, and you will see what happened. Like, for example, I've done a couple posts recently tying the history of the Byzantine Empire to what is happening now. And so, I would strongly recommend reading The Byzantine Empire by Charles Oman, because what you'll see is the result of them welcoming the Visigoths, who were refugees at the time, refugees from the Huns, welcoming them into the... here's a question from Andrew. Who is my favorite Greek philosopher? Without question, Aristotle. I absolutely loathe Plato, and I have an amount of contempt for Socrates because he cheats. There's an appendix in the Iraq. His attempt to create a dilemma is actually cheating. He definitely cheats in his argument, and it's not an honest argument. So absolutely Aristotle. I'm a big fan of his rhetoric in particular. He's not my favorite philosopher overall, though. My favorite philosopher overall is Marcus Aurelius. I tend to find a lot of comfort in his stoic acceptance of the world as it comes. That's one thing that I think that we need to understand, is that the world is always ending. The world is always a disaster. This is not the first time. It's always interesting reading about who people believe might be the Antichrist. I mean, there are probably literally over 750 specific individuals who were very publicly believed to be the Antichrist, just in the last 2,000 years alone. Do I consider the alt-white to be 1488 or 1480? I believe the 1488ers are a very extreme, very small aspect of the alt-white. There's plenty of people who are supremacists who are, want nothing to do with National Socialism. And National Socialism, as I've demonstrated on the blog, National Socialism is totally incompatible with white nationalism. There's absolutely no way to balance Teutonic supremacism with Danish, Scottish, Irish, English nationalism, much less American nationalism. So I think that most of the attempt to discuss and analyze the alt-right is reasonably described as ignorant, if not actually retarded. Let's see, do I like anime? No, I'm not really into cartoons and whatnot. What post-Renaissance philosopher did the most to wreck Western civilization? Well, I mean, I honestly think it all goes back to Plato. I was having dinner about 12 years ago with a admiral in the Italian Navy, and as Italian army and as Italian military officers tend to be, he's an extremely well educated uh, man, and we were discussing politics in America and politics in the EU, and he said, at the end of the day, it really all comes down to Plato versus Aristotle. You know, every political difference, every ideological difference, every philosophical difference, you can basically uh, trace it to the difference between Plato and Aristotle. So, and obviously, I fall strongly on the Aristotelian side. Um, Planning to broadcast here 2 or 3 times a week. Um, I want to see, how this goes. I want to see how many people are actually showing up here. Andrew, do you have any? I don't have any way of seeing how many people are on the stream. I know Andrew's on the stream. Would you have any way of commenting or letting me know so I can let people know? Why have I chosen 2030 as the date for the breakup of the United States? I have that based on how long the it comes to around, it has an average lifespan of around 70 years. And so if you're looking at if you look at the currency being based on the Bretton Woods Agreement, which is essentially the case, um, then then 70 years took it from 73 took us to 2033, and so so that's what it was based on. At times, I was thinking that there were that was a little bit pessimistic, but now some people are thinking it looks optimistic. So who knows? Um, Builders in the Netherlands, yes, he will. I don't know whether they'll be able to form a government, um, but his party will finish first in the voting in the Netherlands. I think that they will probably exceed the polls. The Dutch are not at all happy about the EU. They actually vote. A lot of people don't realize they actually voted against the EU constitution, and then that vote was ignored. The I didn't follow the. Yeah. Are you saying that you don't have any idea of how many people are watching either? Um, Anyhow, it would be nice to have some sort of a view counter, but we'll get into that later. This is what's fun about being on the bleeding edge. You get to actually have a chance to see what works, see what doesn't. A Dutch exit means the euro's gone. I mean, the euro is essentially the Deutschmark, and so the euro will eventually go back to being the Deutschmark. Let's see. Um, Someone suggested that we sound off and count. So it should be interesting. The thing is, you can't really judge from the comments. There's sometimes when you're doing these, you think there's 500 people, then you'll do another one and there's not all that many comments, and then suddenly you look and there's been like 1,500 or something. So. How serious a threat is Antifa? It's not a particularly serious threat in military terms. It's more what it signifies, and that it indicates the depths that both their financiers and the people themselves are willing to go. They could be, I would bet a group of motivated 2 to 3 weeks. I have been following Orban. I think Viktor Orban is probably one of the best politicians that Europe has right now. He's actually, interestingly enough, in Hungarian terms, he's actually a moderate. Um, so there's a lot of Hungarians who are not terribly enthusiastic about him, and they think that he's a little bit soft. But he's definitely what I would consider to be alt-right in the broader sense. What the alt-right is, I've written a thing up called the 16 Points. It's been translated into, I think, 25 languages, and so you can learn more about it there. Don't pay any attention to the opposition media. Don't pay any attention to what they say. And so it's not a you cannot trust what the media is saying about the alt-right any more than you can trust what they're saying about Trump. Somebody said they wish that Galactic would combine. Well, they're not going to combine because they're two separate organizations and they have different goals. Well, Gab, to their credit, is focused on free speech. Infogalactic is not. In fact, when we launch Rehash, which is going to be soon, Rehash is going to be our version of Reddit. It's not going to be a free speech thing. In fact, it's going to be more of a family-safe Reddit, because it's an adjunct to a place that a lot of children are going to be it's coming very soon. In fact, after I finish this Darkstream, I'm going to be testing this evening. So Infogalactic News is on the way, and in fact, we'll probably use Infogalactic News as a way of launching the beginning of the Darkstreams. We'll get the top 3-4 stories from there, just so that people who are not necessarily paying attention to the news that day can always tune in here and at least get the summary. Vote is fine. I have nothing against vote, but a lot of people came to us and asked us to do something with Infogalactic, and because we have the large-scale resources set up to do it, it was relatively easy to do. So let's see. So these scrolls go by pretty quickly, and they kind of jump a little bit, so it's a little bit tough to see. But yeah, that infiltrated. Infogalactic cannot be infiltrated. It's going to be neutral from the subject category in terms of we're not pushing any specific format, or we're not pushing any specific ideology. What we're focused on is removing narrative from have their own perspective, but instead of the user is going to define it. So you'll be able to set your settings, and that will determine what you see. So what I will see on a page about the alt-right will be very different than what some Antifa who logs into Infogalactic sees on the page about the alt-right. So Wikipedia did not claim that at all. They relied upon, from the very beginning, they relied upon individuals policing. Is going to be totally and completely different. It's not going to be, it's not even comparable. I'm a game designer, I know how to design these things. It's going to take us a while to get there. It's going to take us about a year to get to that point, but we'll get to the opinion filtering. But first, we're actually replacing the entire. It's a huge task. There's 5.5 million pages, and it's going to take time for us to do this. This is the Darkstream on Gab TV. I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you on Wednesday night.